Mom and Dad funded her wedding and tossed me $30 until my husband took the mic. If you asked my parents, they'd say they loved both their daughters equally. If you asked anyone who actually grew up in our house, they'd laugh. My sister Vanessa was the golden child, blonde, glowing, always smiling in photos like she was born for a Christmas card. Teachers adored her. Neighbors bragged about her. My mom called her our little star. I was the responsible one, which is just a polite way of saying I didn't get celebrated. Vanessa got praise for existing. I got acknowledgement for surviving. When she got into a private university, my parents threw a backyard party with catered food and a banner that said future CEO. When I got into a state college on academic scholarship, my dad nodded and said, "Good, less tuition for us." I worked part-time through school. Vanessa didn't have to. I bought my first used car at 19. Vanessa got a brand new SUV for her 21st birthday. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. Because I had something Vanessa didn't. Peace. I moved out at 22, built my own life, and met Daniel. Daniel didn't come from money. He came from effort, from 5 a.m. construction shifts and night classes, from knowing what it meant to earn every inch. He never once made me feel small. When he proposed, it wasn't flashy. No orchestra, no beach sunset, just him in our tiny apartment kitchen holding a ring he saved for months to buy. "I can't promise you luxury," he said, voice shaking, "but I can promise you loyalty." I said yes before he finished the sentence. The engagement announcement. 2 months after our engagement, Vanessa announced hers. Of course she did. Her fiancé, Tyler, came from old money, the kind of family that has lake houses and summer as a verb. Within a week, my mom was deep into wedding Pinterest boards like it was a full-time job. "Vanessa deserves something magical," she kept saying. Magical turned into a $60,000 venue. A lakeside estate. Imported flowers. A live band flown in from New York. My dad bragged about it at every opportunity. "It's going to be the event of the year." No one asked about my wedding plans. When I brought it up gently at Sunday dinner, my mom smiled thinly. "Well, honey, we've already committed a lot to your sister's big day." I swallowed. I wasn't asking for a mansion, just maybe a little help. My dad cleared his throat. "You and Daniel are independent. You've always been self-sufficient." There it was again. Self-sufficient. Translation: don't expect anything. Vanessa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You don't need a big wedding, Em. You're more low-key anyway." Low-key. That night, I cried in Daniel's car. Not because I wanted a $60,000 wedding, but because I wanted to feel chosen. The envelope. A week later, my mom invited me over to talk. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd reconsider. Instead, she handed me an envelope. Inside was $30. 3 crisp $10 bills. "For your wedding," she said brightly, "we wanted to give you something." $30. For context, they just paid $8,000 for Vanessa's floral arrangements alone. I stared at the money like it was a joke. "Is this serious?" My dad frowned. "You're being ungrateful." Ungrateful. For $30. I pushed the envelope back across the table. "You can keep it." My mom's face hardened. "Vanessa has always needed more support." "And I haven't," I whispered. Silence. That was my answer. Planning anyway. Daniel and I decided we wouldn't let it ruin us. We booked a small vineyard outside town. Not grand, not viral-worthy, just warm, intimate. 70 guests. String lights. A taco truck instead of a 5-course meal. It was perfect. Daniel's parents offered to help financially, but we refused. They'd already done enough raising a man who knew how to love. Meanwhile, my parents were busy obsessing over Vanessa's, seating chart drama and rehearsal dinner menu tastings. My mom never once asked about my dress. Vanessa texted me pictures of hers daily. Custom Italian lace. Hand-beaded train. Tyler cried when he saw it. I responded with heart emojis. Then muted her. The comparison. Vanessa's wedding came first. Of course it did. It was exactly what you'd expect. Crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, a string quartet playing while guests sipped champagne. My mom wore a designer gown and cried dramatically during the vows. During the reception, my dad stood up and gave a speech about how Vanessa had always been the light of our lives. He didn't mention me once. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. Next month, he whispered, our turn. I nodded. But something inside me cracked that night. Not jealousy. Clarity. I saw it clearly for the first time. I would never be their priority. And maybe that was okay. Because I was someone else. Our wedding day. The vineyard smelled like fresh grass and citrus. My dress was simple, off-white, no designer tag. Daniel looked at me like I was the only thing in the universe. And that was enough. My parents arrived late. My mom looked around like she'd walked into a budget conference room instead of a wedding. Oh, she said, it's quaint. Vanessa whispered loudly, it's cute, in a rustic way. I pretended not to hear. The ceremony was beautiful, honest, no theatrics. When Daniel said his vows, his voice broke. I choose you, he said, not because it's easy, but because it's right. There wasn't a dry eye in the place. Except maybe my mother. The reception tension. Dinner was laughter and clinking glasses. Daniel's dad gave a heartfelt speech about partnership and resilience. Then my dad stood. I hadn't asked him to speak. He tapped the microphone awkwardly. Well, he began, this is exactly the grand affair we're used to lately. A few uncomfortable chuckles. My stomach dropped. But I suppose not everyone needs extravagance. Daniel stiffened beside me. My father continued, Emma has always been practical. Practical. There it was again, the polite downgrade. And we hope this modest beginning suits you. I felt small, on my own wedding day. He raised his glass half-heartedly, to simplicity. Some guests clapped awkwardly. I stared at my plate, cheeks burning. And then, Daniel stood up. Slowly, calmly, and walked toward the microphone. He didn't look angry. He looked steady. My heart pounded. He took the mic from my father's hand. Actually, Daniel said, voice clear and controlled, I'd like to say something. The room went silent. He turned to my parents first. I know you've invested a lot in your other daughter's wedding. You could hear the air shift. But I want to make something very clear. He paused. Emma is not your practical daughter. My mom shifted in her seat. She is the strongest, most loyal, most self-made person I've ever met. He looked at me. And if this wedding looks simple, it's because every dollar here was earned, not handed out. A few guests murmured approval. Daniel's grip tightened on the microphone. You gave us $30. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's eyes widened. Daniel continued, calm as ever. And we didn't need it. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out an envelope. I actually brought it with me. He walked over to my parents' table and placed it in front of them. Keep it, he said. We're building something bigger than money. The room was frozen. My father's face turned red. Daniel wasn't finished. You spent tens of thousands on one daughter. He looked back at me, his voice softening. But the woman I married tonight, she's priceless. And then he did something I didn't expect. He turned back to the guests. And since we're talking about investments, he reached for my hand. Emma and I closed on our first home 3 weeks ago. The room erupted. My parents stared at me in shock. You bought a house, my mom blurted. I smiled for the first time all night. Yes. Daniel nodded. No cosigners, no handouts. He looked at my father. Just hard work. The applause was real this time. Loud. Sincere. My sister looked stunned. For once, the spotlight wasn't on her chandelier wedding. It was on two people who built their life from scratch. The aftermath. After the speeches, guests hugged us with genuine warmth. Daniel's mom whispered in my ear, "You married a warrior." Across the room, my parents sat stiffly. Vanessa avoided eye contact. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the afterthought. I felt chosen, respected, seen. And it wasn't because of money. It was because someone stood up for me. Publicly, without apology. The confrontation. Later that night, my mom cornered me near the bar. "You embarrassed us," she hissed. I blinked. "Embarrassed you? You made it seem like we favor Vanessa." I laughed softly. "You do." Her lips trembled with anger. "We did what was best." "For who?" I asked. She had no answer. My dad approached, jaw tight. "You didn't have to air family matters publicly." I held his gaze. "You didn't have to diminish me publicly either." Silence. Then I said something I'd never dared to say before. "I don't need your money. I needed your respect." He looked away. That told me everything. A shift. In the weeks that followed, something changed. Not in them. In me. I stopped chasing approval that would never come. I stopped attending every Sunday dinner. I stopped pretending the favoritism didn't hurt. Daniel and I focused on our home. Painting walls. Building shelves. Planting a tiny garden. Meanwhile, Vanessa's marriage started showing cracks. Luxury doesn't fix compatibility. Tyler wasn't as charming without an audience. But that's another story. And